Hi, if you're watching this message right now, it means that you're about to watch between episodes 1 and 23 of my show, Conversations with Atul. Please note that when you'll be watching these first 23 episodes, you will just see a picture of me and a picture of the guest on your screen. That is because the first 23 episodes we never recorded live video. These were audio only episodes meant for Spotify. So what happened was, when I shifted my show to YouTube and started recording video, I felt that my audience should also listen to these first fantastic 23 episodes with some amazing people, great anecdotes, inspiring lives. Like Mukhtar Bhai, who runs a carom club in Thane for the last 35 years. The amazing voiceover artist Nikhil Kapoor. The orchestra man Sudhir Sinha, or the whistler Nagesh Surve. I wanted you to be a part of this experience. One little thing that you will see this message that I've recorded right now before each of the 23 episodes of Conversations with Atul. So, enjoy the conversations and welcome to Conversations with Atul.
Conversations with Atul.
He has worked on art films for almost a decade before he directed Aa Dekhe, Zaraa, one of India's rare science fiction films. After the birth of his son, he voluntarily decided to become a stay-at-home dad. As his son turned 14, he realized that these were the wonder years where his boy needed to learn a few life lessons. So one fine day, he took a road trip to Goa with the teenager as pillion. That clearly has been a life-changing and father-son bonding experience for both. And amongst one of the many things we'll converse about today. Please welcome Jeh Surti, a biker by passion, a stay-at-home father by volition, a cosmo by sensibility, and a Parsi at heart. Hi, I'm Atul and welcome to my show, Conversations with Atul. Hello everybody. Today I have a very old friend. I mean, not old as an age, but someone that I've known for quite some time. And I have this series where I feel that we just don't know enough about this country. We feel that people who live are different. If you led a life in Kolkata, it's different. If you led a life in a small village in Ranchi, of course it's different. But there are still similarities and there are still this contrasting cultural differences that one comes across. So I have this friend who is a film director and a writer, a very good writer. I think I'm someone I really like, whose writing I really like. I think he's very lazy, but his writing, I've read so much of his, I've read his films, and I think he's one of the best writers around. So we will get a perspective on writing from him also. But one thing which I want to do, there are two things which I want to do in this episode. One is that try and explore a completely different city where my guest today has grown up, which is he's grown up in Jamshedpur. And then he's moved around and he's finally settled in Bombay. That is one thing. And second is this amazing trip that he's taken, which is the second part of the conversation, with his son Adar. And they have moved on a bike. He's 12-year-old and he had this thing that, okay, this is the age where I can bond with my son. So they just went on a bike for like a 15-day bonding trip from Bombay to Goa. And through various routes, I think, which we will discuss on through jetties and on roads, and so I've heard parts of it, and it's an amazing experience to hear those. So, hi Jeh Surti, how are you doing?
Very well, Atul.
So, JC, the podcast has this. My podcast has this thing where I think we both of us share certain ideas about how this world should be, and I feel that we are now in this country where people keep on talking about kaun 400 saal pehle aaya, kaun 700 saal pehle aaya, and what nobody seems to realize is that all of us are basically migrants. We are always migrating as a species. I mean, like you've come from Jamshedpur, my parents have come from Konkan, now I'm in Bombay, I've lived in Delhi, I've lived around the world a little. So I'm saying that this is how it is. So we'll just go a little back to your grandparents, your parents. And if you can tell us, where is it? Because you're a Parsi, you're the first Parsi on my show. So I think if I had like 10 people, I would make them applaud here because you're the first official Parsi on my show, Jay. So I would also like to understand a little about the culture, which we'll come to as we're talking. But what would be fun to know is that a little about your parents, your grandparents, a little about how this whole where the Parsis come from, if you and a general thing. So please start.
Sure, being rare and soon to be extinct species is a, I don't know
There
if
are
it's
there are
an
only there are only
honor or something else.
you're
Yeah,
documenting your species. There are only
yeah,
50,000 Parsis in this country right now, right? I mean,
yes,
that is the figure,
yes,
and a lot of them are very old. So
yes. I think over 70% of them are
above 60.
above 60 or maybe more.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And okay, so basically, I'm from a small town in the middle of nowhere, or it used to be like that, called Jamshedpur, where
This is a
both,
Tata city town.
correct, it's called, the station is called Tata Nagar, and the city is called Jamshedpur. Both my parents were originally from Bombay, so my grandparents were from Bombay. From my mom's side, my grandfather was one of the first engine drivers who was stationed in Lonavala on the Lonavala to Mumbai route. And my grandmother was a homemaker. They shifted to Japan in the middle, and my grandmother worked with Subhash Chandra Bose.
Oh, let's not jump because this is all very interesting. So take your time. There is no rush in this. Okay, you can ramble on. You can tell
Yeah,
us everything.
sure.
Okay, what I'm saying is that can you just tell me a little about how the Parsis are originally from Iran, right? I mean, so
Yes,
and then they
from
came
Persia.
from
There was
Persia,
no, it wasn't
yeah, which is now
segregated at that time.
right.
Yeah. Uh, well, from what little I know, there were marauding armies, and the way things were in those days, where one kingdom captured another kingdom to grow, and a bunch of Persians at that time decided they had had enough or needed to leave. There was very high taxation, and over the centuries, I think they traded with India before. So they were aware that the opportunities in India were great, and a lot of them were shipbuilders, which at that point was very, very critical to business and prosperity. And a few of them landed up in Gujarat, and I'm sure that story has been told to death, and everyone knows it. Uh, and it took on serious trade routes to Mumbai and other cities from there.
That story which you're talking about is when the Gujarat king of that king asked them. So please, I mean, not everybody knows.
Okay, so basically, the king uh, said, "We don't have place for you. We are like a cup full of milk." And he showed them the milk. And one of the Parsis pulled out a little box of sugar and put the sugar in, and the milk didn't overflow. And he said, "We'll be the sugar in the milk." And I mean, you can understand what that means.
Yeah, yeah.
And there were certain,
Bright thing to say, of
yeah,
course, but there was obviously space in the cup. That's why because the volume.
yeah.
Yeah.
So just
No, but it's
so
such a super.
that's
It's
one
just
of the old myths or stories that go.
yeah, yeah.
And there were a couple of rules. I'm not sure of all of them, but some of them were: do not marry into the native population. Um, Keep your religion to yourself. Do not convert, which anyways didn't matter because you couldn't convert into Zoroastrianism. You were either born a Zoroastrian or not. And so that's how it all started, and they lived by a few rules, and I think they were easily assimilated and liked because they brought with them a lot of skill sets which at that point did not exist on this subcontinent. And those skill sets, like for example shipbuilding, turned things around for the entire subcontinent. Yes, there were ships, but there were no shipbuilders. So the trade routes which were over land got far easier and quicker once they had these homemade, like what you call Make in India now.
Like merchant ships, basically, not really the small ships, but yeah. So they had those skill sets.
Yeah, and so it benefited, I think, the entire subcontinent at that time. And also there is, see, whenever there's prosperity, if you have skills, there's prosperity, and if there's prosperity, there's education. And once you get educated, then you come into a different strata of society. And the thing about Parsis is, since they've seen really rough times, they are also very charitable. And that's what makes them different from most of the other communities, bar the Sikhs or Sikhism, where like the Tata, 66% of their profits go to charitable organizations, which hardly anyone knows.
Right.
And the rest go into dividends, so people who invested in the companies, and it's a great life. And my parents worked almost a century combined for them, so it was and that's where I grew up, in Tata Nagar. And
But your grandparents' story seems more fascinating. Like one of your grandmother was with the Subhash Chandra Bose Army. Your
Yes.
grandfather drove a train. Drove a train between Lonavala and Bombay.
Yes,
So
at that
a
time,
little about that, a lot about that. No problem.
at that time it was a big deal. The train line, I guess, was built from Pune to Mumbai, and he was I think, the chief engineer or chief train driver. I don't know what the term is. It was a highly respected term in those days. And he used to drive the train from Lonavala to Mumbai and back. And my grandmother was a homemaker. When she went, her family shifted to Japan. Um, I don't really remember what the reason was, or haven't been told, but they were there and they had a curio shop
In Japan.
in Japan.
Oh wow.
And that actually, there was her side of the family, there was a curio shop in Darjeeling. And when then they shifted to Japan with their curios.
In the 40s or in the 30s.
Earlier than that, because in the early 19th century, when there was this major fire in Tokyo, is when their shop got burnt down, and they saved whatever antiques they could, and they eked out a living from whatever was left, because most of Tokyo got burnt down in that fire, and one of the shops was my grandparents. And at the same time, Subhash Chandra Bose was in Japan, and it helped to have Indians there. So I think she used to read the letters for whatever coding that used to travel via the letters. She used to help in that, or do some work of that sort. She wouldn't speak much about it.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And from my dad's side, completely different set of Parsis, where my dad's father, my grandfather, was here at the RBI, and the story goes that he was like the general manager there, and he had the big key which he used to keep under his pillow, which was the main
Of the vault.
of the
Of
vault.
the RBI vault with all the gold.
Yeah. And my father and his brothers, as kids, used to hide it and get a whooping from him when it was found. And
Superb.
but my dad's family, I mean, my mom's family were more intellectual. My dad's family was more earthy. They were all into cricket, and one of my uncles even played for India between
So the Japan family was your mom's family, right?
mom's family. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And my dad's family.
And they
was-
all used to live in Bombay before that. I mean,
yeah,
in Parsi colony.
yeah. No, not in Parsi colony. My grandfather, from my dad's side, had a apartment near Ranjit Studios, between Ranjit Studios and Dadar station.
Right, I got it. Parel kinds.
Yeah, kind of. The Bharat Mata, Hind Mata
Bharat Mata in
cinema.
Mata scene. Yeah, yeah.
So close to that. And my mom's side used to live in Tardio. So
Bharat Mata, Hind Mata, let me just say this, are theatres. I mean, they're like iconic theatres in Bombay, and everybody knows about these places. I mean, old timers. So yeah, please. So tell me a little about them too, no? Matlab,
So
where they studied, what they did.
I was really young when my grandparents passed away, but I remember
Your
my,
father's side.
yeah, um, my father's younger brother played for India. He played between, I think, 62 and 1971. And if I'm
He
not,
played cricket for India.
yes,
What's
his
his
name
name?
was Jeh Surti.
Oh,
And he was one of the three or four Parsis who played cricket for India at that point.
wow.
Nari Contractor was one of them. In fact, he was on the other returning uh, crease when Nari Contractor was struck in the head by Gary Sobers, I think, in the West
Right.
Indies, where he was badly injured. And he also had the distinct thing of scoring 99 and getting out against the West Indies, against the most fearsome bowling attacks then.
Mr. Rusi Surti,
Yes, and he was ambidextrous, so he could use his left as well as right. So I think he was a right-hand batsman and a left-arm medium-pace bowler.
wow.
And well, these are just stories. I can't authenticate them, but when he finished, he gave his last set of imported pads to a young boy called Sunny Gavaskar when he made his debut.
Oh God.
And this story only came out much later because when a young short man called Sachin Tendulkar made his debut, Sunny had given him his first set of imported pads. So that tradition, I don't know.
And
if
he
it's
said
still-
it. Yeah, such Sunny. Sunil Gavaskar is on record saying that I was given
Yes.
my imported
Yes.
pads,
First kit.
first kit by
Yes.
Rusi Surti.
Surti, yes.
Oh God.
And well, all that is history because they were just young boys and trying to make it good. And he went on, he was the first overseas player also for India in Australia because my uncle moved to Australia then and he played for Queensland and for quite a few years. And he was fairly successful in promoting the sport there as well, right up to when indoor cricket was made very popular there. So that's my grandfather's side. of the
You
story.
have any idea about Mr. Rusi Surti's statistics? Cricket statistics?
Not
anything?
really, but they are on the net. You can look them up. And his
Right.
house in Brisbane has been converted into a memorial by one of his sons, where the famous, I think he had broken the wicket when he bowled. Broke the wicket of one of the famous West. I think it was Gary Sobers only, his wicket. So that is framed and kept, and many pictures of him and the tours they took. And he finally retired in 71 to go abroad because it was much more lucrative to play anywhere else but for India because at that point cricketers were hardly paid anything. And the story goes that the Nawab of Pataudi was then the captain and did not enjoy this young Parsi boy in the slips eating peanuts all the time and throwing the shells on the ground because he was getting bored in between overs and thing. But he was the first great fielder for this country.
Okay.
I mean, I have heard on air Sunil Gavaskar mention him when Jaunty Rhodes was known as the best fielder in the world. Sunny Gavaskar was on record saying that there was one Indian who could match him.
It was Rusi Surti. Oh my God, that's. Oh my God.
So that's that side of the family.
That's comparison is, I mean, amazing. If somebody is comparing, I mean, someone like Sunil Gavaskar is comparing Jaunty Rhodes with I mean with Jaunty Rhodes. I mean, we have a reference to Jaunty Rhodes. We may not have a reference to Jeh Surti, but then it's obvious that what kind of a fielder he must have been. Even if he was like, I'm saying 50% of Jaunty Rhodes,
Yeah.
he was one of the best fielders in the world.
Yeah, but
You know?
Atul, the thing is, at that point, today club cricketers earn more than what national cricketers earned then.
Yeah, but
So,
that's a part of life. I mean, that's
No, it's not a complaint. It's just that hence it was not so popular and people weren't.
yeah.
But there are still, I meet people in their 70s who tell me about how they used to go to, I think, Ruparel College in Mahim.
Yeah, which was a cricket thing.
Yeah, and they used to watch him because our home was close to that and he used to go and practice there. And one of my wife's uncles, in fact, was a big fan of his, which I found out after marriage, who told me they used to just come and sit there to watch him field. Or
Oh,
bowl or
really?
bat. Yeah.
So it was known, na? Matlab, we may not know today. Like if you ask your son about cricketers like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, he'll not know.
Yeah.
So exactly the same thing. I mean, so there is definitely a reference to his greatness. I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely a reference to that. So your father was born in Australia then?
No, my father was born, they were all born in Bombay.
Okay.
My father went on, my father was also, in fact,
But your grandfather was in Australia, right?
no, my grandfather was here.
Oh, sorry, right.
My dad's younger brother who played cricket went to
Australia,
Australia.
okay.
Yeah, after retirement
Okay.
from the Indian team and played there
Right.
for the state.
Right.
And I think he was hired by the fire department because you had to have that official job.
Then it was like this.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think he ever went to the fire station, but he was always on the ground playing. And I remember he was fit until he survived in his mid 70s also. He could outrun most 20, 25-year-olds. He was super fit.
You have memories? You have.
Yes, I do, because he lived with us for a short while in Bombay. Like all good Parsi families, we had property disputes. So I had the good fortune of experiencing that and all the things that go along with it.
Okay. So tell me a little about your father now. I mean, it's.
My dad, obviously, my grandfather realized that the youngest one wanted to play cricket and at 17 or 18 quit studies. The middle one joined a mill in Bombay, and my grandfather was very keen that the oldest one study. So my father was packed off in a ship to England to study mechanical engineering, and my father went there. Well, there's a story there as well because it seems my father bought a bunch of postcards on the ship and wrote letters and dated them a month apart and gave them to one of his friends to post from England. And he hopped off in Italy and traveled Europe for 2 years and then went to England finally to study. Yep.
So he never went to England for 2 years.
Yep. He traveled. At that time, it was Europe was just coming out of the war, and it had just been like less than a decade after the World
But
War
you would
II.
still have to call, right? The trunk call and.
No, at that point, there were no. He had managed somehow to avoid studies for 2 years,
Oh God.
and he traveled a lot. And I guess that's where it all started for me, because hearing these stories, and I know for a fact that he had a motorcycle there and traveled all over Europe there. And well, he wouldn't speak much about it, so what happened in Europe stayed in Europe. But my mom used to once in a while tell us about it. My mom too has an interesting story.
No, I just we'll come to this again, but you mentioned something which interests me, which is that his middle son used to work in a mill.
Yes.
So in Bombay, in the mill, yeah. So what was it? He was a worker in the mill, or he was a manager in the mill?
Like a junior officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He retired, took VRS, and he lived the rest of his life comfortably in Mumbai. I mean, he was a bit of an introvert, so because the younger one was an international cricket
Cricketer.
player, and my dad went on to do things for Tata Steel, and he had a quiet life. My mom is the one who had an
But he
interesting.
quite
I wouldn't know about
okay.
that.
Because my film is about the mill strike,
Yeah.
you know. So,
Yeah.
okay, now let's get back to your father. And then what happened in England?
Then he went on to study mechanical engineering in Cambridge there, and started working there. And at some point, Sir Dorab Tata, one of founders, G.N. Tata's brothers, came and recruited him and told him that come back to India.
They recruited him in England.
Yes. So this gentleman used to travel all over the world, recruiting Parsis from all the universities and all the different cities he would find out.
Mr. Dorab Tata.
Yes. And he recruited him and promised him a cycle, a house to live in, and domestic help, and a garden.
A cycle.
Yeah, and probably at that point, some royal figure of 10 rupees a month salary. And said, come, we are starting something which is going to be amazing. We started something which is amazing, and it's going to be one of the leading steel companies of the world. And my father took up the offer. The same happened with my mother. My mother was here in Sophia College, and then she went to Stanford to study.
Oh, you
And
Babre.
she did her master's in English literature.
You are an outlier, boss.
Outlier, yes.
You're an outlier, yeah.
Yeah. So she was there in the tumultuous times when JFK was murdered. And just a week before that, my mother tells me, this is funny because coming from a Parsi, she says, I saw the first two colored people walk into Stanford. So I was like, Mom, you are also colored. So she said, no, properly colored people. And a week later, JFK was murdered. So at that point, she was in the States studying there. And she also had random stories of how during spring break, a bunch of girls, they'd get together and they'd sail to Europe and hire a car, and they would roam around. And she mentioned once that, we had been for one festival in the early 60s. It was huge. It was in this field. It was called Woodstock. And we had a great time there. And then we came back to America to study and things. So I was, till that point, I always considered them as mom and dad. But then I started seeing them as very cool individuals who I happened fortunate enough to be their child. And she too was recruited there by Dorab Tata, who was promised a job in, then it was called Telco, now it's known as Tata Motors, to come and help out with the schools there. And my mom was one of the first women to pass out of TAS, Tata Administrative Services. And go to this small town in Bihar where it was completely male dominated. So this American studied Parsi girl from Bombay goes and starts schools, hospitals, publications, public relations. She headed all of those over her years there. And fond memory of her was she used to do a lot of tribal work. And she would have this Willys Jeep which she would drive around. And when we were teenagers, we tried to drive it, and we realized we couldn't even move the steering wheel or get the brakes. It was so rigid. But here was this mid-40s or 50s at that point mother who would go into the hills which were infested by elephant herds to go and help tribals over there. So, well, I mean, I have a lot to live up to and big shoes to fill. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know all these stories. These are like fascinating stories, I think. And they're fascinating for you too, I think, in your head.
Absolutely, because every
Because it
time.
seems like some characters out of a film. I mean, they don't seem like
Yeah,
a
the thing
woman
is,
driving a Willys Jeep in interior Bihar somewhere.
yeah, in the hills in Dalma. These stories is what made me realize that a lot of us look at our parents and siblings just as that. They are much more than that. They are individuals who've achieved so much and done so much. And being the youngest, of course, I benefited the most because I was born post their struggling years and saw the best of them. But it taught me that lesson to always look at your siblings and parents as individuals also. It's very important. We just treat them like mom and dad, and the love and affection and food and thing. But there's much more to people than just that, even if they are your parents.
But this is one thing which I want to come back to, was that during that time, a lot of Indians who were studying abroad actually came back and tried to give back to the country. So I mean, what was that feeling? I mean, if have they ever talked about it, that why did they come back from, say, a developed country or from a different kind of atmosphere to a country which was then struggling? I mean, so.
Atul, I think both of them had a serious streak of adventure and unconventional thought processes, which were, here was an opportunity to go to a small town it was going to become something, and there was a vision, and it was J.N. Tata who had that vision, and obviously that vision trickled down into people all over the world to come and collect there and do something. And I think my parents shared that vision. And I mean, today I do one job and I'm overwhelmed in Bombay. But to think at that point, they used to handle the blood bank, they used to handle hospitals, they used to handle schools. Apart from just their work, which they used to do for the company. And my father used to look after, there was a lake in front of our house, which he'd set up like fishing there, so poor folk could come and fish there, where they would pay something like 2 rupees for the entire year, and whatever fish they caught was theirs. And a lot of families lived on that because at that point they couldn't even afford to buy a full fish, but one full fish meant 2 meals for an entire family. So they were doing all kinds of social work, and you have to give it to them. They had a lot of fun too, because there were a lot of other community members and other communities too, people who had come in, and jointly they were trying to make something out of nothing over there. And that was a kind of bond where today, if you look around, you will find one person from Jamshedpur everywhere in the world, and mostly successful. Whether it be the film industry or the courier company, the steel or anything, any form you will find, or music, you will find somebody from Jamshedpur. Not necessarily Parsi, but from Jamshedpur. I
Like
mean,
Imtiaz Ali, who's.
yes, absolutely. He's one of the he was my classmate, in fact, who's quite an inspiration because everything he's done here is on his own. And it's amazing. Then there's Mr. Madhavan, who's also a classmate.
R. Madhavan.
Yes, who's also done extremely well for himself.
I thought he was from Kolhapur. I don't know why. I mean, he went to
No,
Kolhapur
he was
after
from
that.
Jamshedpur proper.
Okay. I think it is engineering in Kolhapur.
Yeah. So there were a few of us who decided to break the mold of the accountant, engineer, doctor mode, which was expected of us. And we landed up here finally doing film work. So there was definitely, because I think in my parents' generation, it was unconventional to go to a small town and help build something, build a vision, which J.N. Tata had. But by the time we came along, that vision had been built and was running successful. So that the unconventional became conventional then, when we were all expected to be engineers, doctors, and accountants. So somehow that seeped through in us, and a lot of us went into music or film or writing or acting or other fields, art fields. So it was always about being unconventional.
Right. So where were you born? You were born in.
I was born in Jamshedpur. There's an interesting story there, which I found out now in my late 40s. I found out that the house I was born in is the house where Gerald Durrell was born. And that is the first heritage site in Jamshedpur, which is the house we lived in. And it was amazing because I love nature, I love travel, I love writing, and I found out that one of the world's greatest horticulturists, writers, was born in the same house. And
Oh, so is that your interest in gardening? Does it has it been
maybe
triggered after you came to know that that you?
no, I've been gardening also and farming for close to 20 years. So I just found this out last year.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a happy coincidence. Of course, everyone says, then why don't you write as well as Gerald Durrell? But I don't think that's possible.
No, you write pretty well. So I have little doubt that you write it pretty well. You're just whatever. I'm saying that. So what? What do you remember about your childhood from the time you were born in a space like Jamshedpur? Let's now explore this city. Now it's a city. Now it's no longer
Yes.
a small town. But I'm saying that when it was a small Tata town, what do you remember of this space? What do you remember of Jamshedpur outside of the Tata space? And even within the Tata space, because I think somewhere what I would like to do with my podcast is to give an experience of various small town cities in the country. From that, explain from that perspective.
Okay. Pardon my French, but in the middle of buttfuck nowhere was this little town which was heaven. It had people from all over the world who came there.
Tata Nagar.
Yes, and were building something and building on something which had been ongoing, and they had created an idyllic situation there where the schools, the hospitals, the infrastructure within the Tata setup was perfect for a growing child. I mean, and the community there. I mean, yes, there was the Parsi community, but the community in large, there weren't just Parsis. I mean, there were many communities, but it was like a Jamshedpur community where the teachers, the uncles, the aunts, everyone knew everyone. The children were treated with utmost love and respect, and we were brought up very, very well. And because of the exposure all our parents had, it seeped into us that we had to know what was right and wrong. It was very important that kids learn what is right and what is wrong. And so we are a rare breed where we judge things for what is right and what is wrong. And today, what's happening, so we are a bit of a misfit today where things seem to be happening in all over the world and in our country, where right might be considered wrong and wrong might be considered right. So that little town, and it had its clubs, and we had a great social life. I mean, I remember dinner at home was only 3 or 4 times a week, because the remaining times we would be at somebody or the other's houses. And I, as a child, was famous on my street because I would never ever be in my house. I would either be in my neighbor, the dentist's house, Dr. Pirosha, who's either the guava tree, mango tree, or the bale tree. I would be up there, sitting, eating fruit with my little penknife. And I would be yelled at to come down during lunch and dinner and breakfast. And so, yeah, we climbed trees, we swam in the lake, we went to school, we did our homework. Yes, there were tuitions, but tuitions were always given by an uncle or an aunt. All the doctors were our friends also because they were also employees of the Tata company, just like all of us. And they worked on a salary, so it was didn't matter how many patients they had. So the work ethic was very different amongst the doctor community than it is now, where it got privatized and you could do private practice and so on and so forth. Where we would just go and land up at the hospital and we would march into the doctor's thing and say, "Uncle, auntie, this is the problem, please fix it." And it also helped that all medication was free because we were children of Tata employees. And I mean, some of the best doctors in the world came out of there too.
But it was a privileged life, right? I mean, if you were to look at
It was privileged because an entire generation, or at least two generations, worked very, very hard to make it that privileged. And the company set up a certain, what is now known as CSR, which they started
corporate social responsibility. Yeah.
more than 100 years ago. There was no name for it. It was just like being good to your employees, where they set up schools, clubs, and things so the employees could be efficient when they came to work. Everything else was taken care of. So within the setup, it was normal for all of us. It's only when we all came out to study, because that's the one thing Jamshedpur lacked, was higher education. When we all came out, we missed that little bubble of heaven which we had and came out into the cutthroat world. So that was one little disadvantage of that privilege, if you can call it that. So yes, there's a big difference between entitlement and privilege. Entitlement has a negative connotation to it. Privilege has a lot of progressive and growth-based meanings. And so that privilege had come from blood, sweat, and tears of generations of people. So I won't, claim being superior because of that privilege, but being blessed by that privilege.
Yeah, of course, it's a blessing. I mean, it's also in the context of how I think the world looks at, for example, if a star kid gets launched, and the way people react to it in this country today, but his parents didn't have it that easy. So it's like, if my parents could do whatever they did, they put me through the best business school, they put me through a best film school, so I'm saying that it's something that they worked for, and I had that privilege. So that is exactly how it is for everybody, I think, So tell me a little about your friends then, I mean, and the kind of things you used to do in that colony, other than swimming and...
Oh, well, it used to be crazy because I, of course, left when I was 12 for boarding school. I went to Darjeeling for 5 years. But I used to come home for the holidays. And I had a close knit circle of friends, of my parents' friends' children, some who were still there and others who had been sent to other boarding schools. So we all had our holidays at the same time. So maybe some came from Sanar, some came from Doon, some of us came from Darjeeling, some who remained behind in Jamshedpur. And it would be like we haven't skipped a day, because we would start doing our masti in the club, or walking around, or cycling around the city. If you've seen the film Udaan, a lot of that is documented because I think Imtiaz wrote that film. And a lot of what the fun parts that the kids did in that film were actually used to happen.
It was also shot in Jamshedpur, I think.
Yes.
Right.
A lot of films are shot there.
Vikramaditya Motwan is the director, just
Yes.
for, yeah.
Yes.
And how was, I mean, this, I think we got a good picture of what the Tata colony was, and what
Yeah, it was a town, an entire town.
entire town. I'm saying, but how was Jamshedpur outside of the Tata colony? I mean, as a, what
There
was it?
was no outside. It was just that there were lots of ancillary services required to run a town. And the town was in a Y junction where two rivers met, Kharkai and Subarnarekha. So there were bridges on either side where private people set up their houses or industries, but it was not organized and it was not planned. It was a bit haphazard. Things have changed since then, of course, but in those days it used to be quite slum-like.
The rest of the,
Yeah. Well, the rest of it was Bihar, and in those days,
yeah.
corruption was rampant and all sorts of crime and other things used to happen there. But we were in the heart of it in a little bubble, and obviously the
So there was
elders
this
had worked-
modern town, and the rest of it was like Wasepur that we see in the film.
possibly, and I'm sure the generations of people ahead of us must have had to fight really hard to keep it what it was.
Right.
Yeah. And to maintain a certain level of honesty, integrity, and dignity of life, of a certain standard, it must have been difficult for them. Well, we reaped the benefits, so I'm not complaining at all. So that was it in the small town. And friends, I went back there for my 11th and 12th to a school called DBMS English School. And those 2 years were also good. I made a lot of friends. I tried my hand at science and realized I couldn't manage, so I moved to commerce. And so I had, like, the entire batch was friends with me because I knew the science boys, I knew the commerce boys. And we all went about our ways after those 2 years, but we are all still in touch. Like my entire, the boys in my class from commerce, we have a WhatsApp group, which is probably the most active WhatsApp group on my phone, 35 years later. And we do have our reunions once every couple of years.
So when you were 12, now let's get back a little. I mean, I'm saying that when you were 12, why were you sent off to boarding school? I mean, what is the reason for that? Because I'm not. I'm saying this because I'm not really used to this culture. I mean, maybe lower middle class kids in Maharashtra never did this, but I've heard this from a lot of people that they went to boarding school.
Yep.
It was probably slightly upper middle class kind of a thing.
Yes.
Too. But why was there anything specific which parents of that generation of that class thought that their children should go to boarding school?
Yes, I can speak for my family. There were three of us, my sister, brother, and me as the youngest. My parents were very clear. They said, we will spend every penny on all of you for education, but after that, you're on your own. So my parents didn't plan to save for us for our future. They planned to educate us for our future. And at that point, I think because we were all well aware that there weren't higher studies there, it was to give the children exposure outside of that little bubble. Because sometimes living in a bubble can be very dangerous. And my parents wanted us to see the world. And they sent us to some of the best schools that they could afford. And also at that point, I think my parents started doing well at work. And they were spending a lot of time in office. And they did not want us to be raised by ayahs or drivers, and chose to insist send us to a boarding school, which would give you an all-round education. And there was that element in those days of international exposure too, because there were a lot of international students in our boarding schools. So that was the choice made by my father and mother. And I distinctly remember that almost every penny that my parents had went into the education all three of us children had, because my father couldn't afford to buy a house after he retired. They lived in a rental till the end, which is unheard of because he retired as a director of environmental management there. But they chose to spend all their money on our education, and that's how it was. I mean, there was no argument about that. And my sister's gone on to do very well for herself, now settled in Australia. She's got 2 doctorates. My brother has been the principal of a catering college and does consultancy for hotels. And
He was the principal of the other catering college, was it?
No, not here. It was in Bangalore.
Okay.
And he was one of the youngest. In fact, at age 28 or 29, he became the principal. So the students and him, there wasn't much of an age gap. But so anyway, we've all achieved this because our parents were very clear that they would like to make us into well-rounded individuals who stand on our own 2 feet rather than count on an inheritance.
Okay, I was casting for this short film that I was making once, and there's this actor who is pretty well known. I forget his name now, and I'd gone to his house, and we generally started talking, and he suddenly got personal, and he talked about us. This is a general question, okay? I mean, it may not be true for you, but just to get a perspective. I mean, and he started talking about his daughter, who was in boarding school, and then she was in boarding school for about 4-5 years or 6 years, and then he said that when she came back, there was a disconnect that she felt with her parents. Does that happen? I mean, or does it happen, if not with you, with your friends, or did it happen with you or with your siblings? Do you feel that, or is that okay? I mean, that's that's the other side, the flip side of it.
Absolutely not, Atul. It's a bit immature to say that because you're clubbing everyone together. I'll tell you, in boarding school, we discovered over a period of time, there were a couple of us, or many of us, who were sent because our parents wanted us to do well and have a good education, and they had researched the institution. There were some who just wanted to send their children away and lead their lives.
Okay.
And there were some who came from broken homes, so were there. And boarding school is what you make of it. You know, there's this generalization, there are drugs in boarding schools, or there are vices that
there
you
are drugs
learn.
in IIT also. I mean,
yes, I mean, having experienced it, but it's too difficult to constantly explain. So I just let people believe what they want to believe. But it definitely...
No, but it's a perspective, no? You are right now, you can give a perspective which is...
Yeah. There was no disconnect at all. In fact, they used to look forward to us coming. They missed us.
No, not their disconnect. I'm talking about your disconnect, because you're also growing up.
Yes,
you're also growing up.
Yes.
And then I'm not talking about, like, what this actor, he told me was that we wanted to lead our own lives because my wife is also an actress. And we had this, and so we sent her away. And when she came back, there was a certain disconnect from her side, not so much from their side. But because that whole thing is that she is growing up and she is passing through a certain phase herself, and where I'm sure even at me at 13, I cared a lot less about my parents than my friends. So I mean, that is what he was talking about.
So maybe his personal experience,
right.
I can't really comment on it, but it is what you make of it, yeah. And you can screw something up, or you can make the most of it in any scenario. And for us, boarding school was amazing because it gave us a well-rounded education. In fact, when I came back, I had a disconnect with my friends in Jamshedpur because I realized that I had been exposed
to a different world.
In fact, on my 50th birthday, um I thanked one of my friends who we spoke about earlier for the concern he showed when when I came back from boarding school, and he said, "Oh, you have no idea how intimidating you were when you came back." And I was like, I was the loneliest person for a few months because nobody would talk to me. And I didn't know I was intimidating. I was just trying to make friends. And being in boarding school, you're exposed to a lot more. Uh, and you're not under the protective shield of your parents. And I think a lot of character building happens in children who go to boarding school earlier on in life. Those who don't, they develop their character a little later in life, say in college or in their first few years of work.
That I agree with. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that difference is there in children who go to boarding school, that the character building exercises have happened in their teenage years. And yes, hormones are going crazy. Uh, it's that odd age. Personally, I feel that's the best time to be trained into being a good person. Having gone through it myself, not that I'm a terrific person, but whatever little good I have in me has been beaten into me by the Jesuits in our school, and routine, honor, pride in whatever you do is what I learned from there. And in today's day and age, of course, at our age, I can actually see and compare kids because I have friends who are in the same socio-economic bracket and have had sort of similar upbringings. And I see their children who have been either overprotected or let loose completely. Balance is the key, I think, here. And coming to, I mean, I know we are going to talk about my bikepacking trip with my little kid, but that was one of the things I wanted my son to learn, balance, where at home maybe I micromanage for him. And now he's 14, he's going to be 15. He needs to learn to handle things on his own. And this bike packing thing would have given him an opportunity outside of the house. Because at home, everything is...
On a platter.
yeah, on a platter. And maybe, I mean, we were at that age. We never listened to our parents either. But if some uncle or aunt who we looked up to said even one word, we glorified it immediately. So experiences outside the house, I wanted him to have. And that's what we had in boarding school.
But why you didn't send your son to boarding school, right? In spite of your view of boarding schools.
Absolutely. One was we had other quite late
Right.
in our thing because both of us were in the film industry struggling, and we had made up our minds that we would only have a child if we could own our own house in Bombay. And since both of our parents had given us solid education and upbringing, we didn't inherit any money. We had to make all that on our own. So it was an uphill struggle to buy a house. But the moment we bought it, 10 months later, we had a kid.
I know the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though my mother and mother-in-law always said that, oh, bichara log, 10 saal ke baad bachcha hua inko. They had no idea that we didn't want to have a child before that.
Yeah, I know the story. Yeah.
So, when we did, Bombay is a fair distance away from most of the good boarding schools. And unfortunately for Pooja and I, we have brought up other on our own. You know, we haven't had the support of our grandparents, of his grandparents, our parents, because my parents passed away in the last decade or so, and her father did too. And her mom, who lives here, is aged. So that's the problem with having kids later on in life, where
Right.
the grandparents aren't generally around when you do that. So we were bringing him up on our own, and we didn't have the village to raise the kid. You know, like normally to raise a kid, you need a village, and which is your community around you. And we didn't have any immediate help. So we plodded along and learnt and didn't made mistakes and rectified them, and thought through everything we did in his upbringing. We thought through it very hard. We didn't trivialize anything. We were struggling too at that point of our lives, and I had just made my debut as a director when he was born, and Pooja had just completed to Johnny Gaddar at that point as an editor and writer. And well, we didn't have the finance either because we had bought the house before that. So there was no question of affording boarding school.
But you would have liked to send him? No.
Well, if I had lived in Jamshedpur and I had a house
Access.
and thing and, you know, a very stable life, I would have loved to send him to boarding school. But since we chose this industry, which is completely haphazard and payments are all over the place, they can happen, they can't, they come in huge tranches or they don't come at all. A commitment, financial commitment like a boarding school might have been too much for us.
So, what was, other than this generic discussion we had about boarding schools, now let's get down to specifics about how was your boarding school experience, you know, with friends, with, was there a complete cultural shift? Was it a different life altogether? Because here you were sitting on trees and, you know, and cutting things with a penknife. And then you're suddenly out in where, like in my other show with Bharti Rajaram, who is a traveler, and she said something like that the moment I went to REC in Bihar, in Patna, I mean, I suddenly had to make my own decisions. All my decisions I had to make on my own. I had to manage my own money. I had to manage there was nobody to negotiate with, you know, there was nobody to negotiate between friends. There was nothing. I mean, it was all new, and that is, what was the kind of experience there?
Okay, I have a funny story here. Okay, so I finished my fifth in Jamshedpur and I joined in the seventh in boarding school. So it was like a double promotion. And the first week I was there, my mother accompanied me. First week, she left after I joined the school. Luckily, my brother was there for the whole year. He was in the 10th at that point. But I cried that whole week because I was homesick. I wanted to go back. I realized I had to fold my own clothes. I had to make my own bed. I had to be on time for everything. Nobody would remind me. And I would get like walloped if I didn't. And being the youngest, yes, I was spoilt. And it took me a week or 10 days to get used to it. And the quantum of studies, because I missed the sixth and suddenly in the seventh, was huge. And I couldn't cope. But let me tell you, that year I had so much fun. And I had so many privileges because my brother was in the 10th class.
He was in the same boarding school.
Same boarding. He was finishing.
Ah.
I had so many privileges there thanks to him, especially in the canteen with the canteen staff. I had so much fun that when I was going to be sent home, I cried for 4 days that I'm going to be sent home now because I didn't want to go home. And also, I probably knew that I'd flunked and that a walloping from my father was due.
So you flunked in your
So
sixth.
after getting double promoted, I flunked the year. So I came back into the seventh. So instead of doing fifth, sixth, seventh, I did fifth, seventh, seventh. And then it stabilized, of course. My brother left. I had no protection in boarding school, so to speak. I had to make my own way. And the boys physically are much tougher there. So... but being up in the hills where you're running, eating good food, the school had amazing food in their canteen and in the mess. and running around, you pretty much developed physically really fast. And mentally, uh, also it was great because in those years, the ICSC books, physics was written by a Mr. Morris Banerjee, chemistry was written by Mr. John West, and biology was written by P.A. Paulos. And all those three teachers were those teachers in our school.
Oh, wow.
So they were teaching us.
Oh, wow.
And so that was special at that point. And some of the older teachers there who had been there 40, 50 years was amazing. I mean, I don't know about the academics part of it, but about life and how to look at things and how to gauge things and how to analyze things, we were taught there by these people.
Which boarding school did you go to?
This was St. Joseph's College, Darjeeling School Department, which is popularly known as North Point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once you'd finished this, you came back to...
My father said, enough independence and fun, come back to us for 2 years. Because he knew that once I went back to college, I'm not going to show up again. And he knew that I enjoyed the freedom thoroughly and not being under a watchful eye. Because boarding school, as strict as it is, there are moments where you can have a lot of fun too, like bunking and running around and things. So he wanted us back. He wanted me back for the 11th and 12th. And I did go back, and I immediately had a step up because of all the rigorous physical activity. I had no problem playing basketball in the school team, football, or whatever sport there was. One excelled at, because your boarding school standards of sports are much higher than day school.
Right.
And so that was enjoyable. Then I went on to win the famous elections in the 12th, which I didn't know was a big deal, but I discovered later was a big deal, of the president of the school or the head boy, whatever it was called at that point. And,
In the 12th.
Yeah. And my parents were thrilled because in the same year, my brother became the head boy or its equivalent in the other catering college. And so have both their sons be head boys. Little did they know that I misused that completely and had a lot of fun thanks to being the head boy and could get away with a lot of stuff in school. So I always had a streak of mischief and being unconventional.
That means you were popular, right? If you won an election in a
Yes,
school.
yes.
And what made you popular other than basketball?
One had come from the hills, so I think I was extremely fair and rosy-cheeked after having spent 5-6 years. Yeah, and also the as I said, the exposure. Your personality was far more developed at
Than
that
the ones around
stage
you.
than my friends around me, and they've made it amply clear to me that how they were jealous of me for it, but loved me for it also because there was somebody to learn from. And though for my 50th, most of them told me that I taught them how to drink or smoke, which was terrible to hear. But well, that's what it was when we were teenagers.
But that's not so terrible to hear when you were 17, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's like a compliment.
you taught. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
compliment.
Yeah.
Maybe you look at it from a different perspective right now.
Yeah.
But that's. But what were your drinking and smoking kissas stories then? Why are so many of your friends telling you this?
Well, maybe in boarding school, I was one of the last to start smoking or drinking. I mean, one, I didn't have enough money. So it would just be a couple of sips from somebody else's glass or sharing a cigarette with somebody. But in college, yeah, when I came to Bombay, yes, we did have. I was fortunate enough to live in my grandmother's house on my own, and all my other friends lived in hostels. So having a flat to your own when you're in college is
In Bombay, that
it's
in
a
town.
big advantage in town. Yeah. So we had
Where was this flat?
in Tardiv.
In Tardev.
Yeah.
Baapre.
Yeah.
In the 80s.
In the
Early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah. So that's huge to have a
So
flat.
I had friends here in NM and Mitibai College, and I had friends in Xavier's, and I had friends in Sydenham, and I had friends in HR College. So every week of the day, I'd assign to a certain group of friends, and it was very clear at that point. If you want to come and hang out with me, bring that half bottle of Old Monk rum, because that's the fees for hanging out and also watching TV at home, because they didn't have television in their hostels at that point. And we had some of the most rip-roaring times, especially during the World Cups, whether it was football or cricket, and we would
Cable TV had just made
Yes.
its entrance in India.
Yeah. And I remember not being able to afford cable TV. So how we had fashioned a wire which we had hooked up with somebody
Somebody else's
else's
wire.
cable
Yeah.
wire, and grainy as hell, but at least 2 football World Cups we watched there.
Yeah.
And at all ridiculous times of the night and day, but I guess the alcohol and other substance abuse kept us going for months on end. And yeah, I mean, these are things which you do in college. I mean,
Yeah, so for people who didn't know this, I mean, cable TV there was before the 90s, and even till 1991, I think, till 1990 at least, there was no cable TV in India. So the only thing you could watch was Doordarshan with its 2 channels.
Yep.
You know, so that is all that you could watch. And then suddenly cable TV came in, and there's a Star TV network. I think Robert Murdoch was the guy who bought it here. And you had 24 hours television, like 50, 70 channels, and you had this choice of anything that you could watch. But it was slightly expensive, like Jay here saying.
sorry, Atul, going back
Yeah.
before thing, I don't think any other kid has watched Krishi Darshan more than me during exams, especially. I would sit in the afternoon and watch the most boring fuck all shows on DD just so that I didn't have to study. Yeah, maybe that's where my interest in gardening and farming has come from. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, because of Krishi Darshan. There's so many people. I mean, even this was the second reference. I've not done so many episodes yet, and this must be the second or third reference to Krishi Darshan on my show. You know, because there's a generation which has grown up watching boring television because there was nothing else. And what he's talking about, which is like, then what used to happen is that you could actually, on your television sets, you had to physically insert a cable, you know, to get cable television, which was those 50 channels. Now, if you didn't have the money, or if your parents didn't allow it, or whatever other reason is, that what you could do is, your neighbor had a cable television, then you could have a kind of a hook, you know, which you could put on their wire and have this just by the wire, that is, and then just plug it to your TV, and your TV would get very grainy images of of all the channels that your neighbor was getting. And that is how, I think that is what, just for a reference. That is
I
exactly
think we had a safety pin which we had put through their wire and attached to a wire onto our TV, my neighbor's TV at that point. And we had some good times there.
And why did you come to Bombay from after that 11th, 12th that you did there?
I was very clear I didn't want to go to Delhi. I don't know why, but I think traditionally
Okay, so the
from my
choice
boarding
was-
school, a lot of people came to Bombay.
So there was nothing in Jamshedpur after 12th which was even remotely interesting.
No, there wasn't.
Okay, so almost everybody would, the
Yeah,
children would
and
move out.
I mean, everybody would move out, and mostly what, IIM or IIT? I mean,
Barabar.
yeah,
IIT,
matlab, हाँ,
engineering. So you're moving out
yeah.
anyway.
And in those days, NIIT had just started. So a lot of people joined that, and almost everyone went to the States after that. And I mean, either made their apps or whatever and sold them off and have come back, or continue there as techies.
You're right. Right. So, but
Okay,
since-
something interesting I have to discuss with you here. It's unrelated but related to the conversation we had. this film Kashmir Files, which has come and gone and made everyone shout and scream and support it and not support it. If you remember when we were children, Shyam Benegal, I think, had made a series called Tamas, which we
Govind
watched.
Nilani made that.
Govind Nilani, sorry. On DD.
Yeah, it's a book.
Which was about partition, and it said it like how it was.
It
But
was
there
amazing.
but nobody ever used it as a tool
Right, as a political tool.
for divisive
Right.
things to do for political gains. I've always wondered what is the difference then and now, because I remember that was the punches weren't held back on that series.
Nothing. And it was on
And-
DD.
Yeah.
It was shown on DD,
Yeah.
which was a national channel.
Yeah, and in fact, I think it brought people together. The fact that the horrors that had happened, that we shouldn't let it happen again. And here we have now some film being made and people using it as a tool to be more divisive. I mean, I really don't get it.
No, but I don't really agree with, not agree, I'm saying that I have a slightly different point of view, because I have been in Bombay all my life, and I have seen the 1984 riots, and I've seen the 1993 riots, and they were all Hindu-Muslim riots. And they were huge riots. I mean, they were not like, because I remember my friend had to, I mean, it's there in episode 7, Biju Kutti, and there is a whole story to it. Like, I had a Muslim friend, and they were just, by the skin of their teeth, they were saved. Otherwise, they would have been burnt alive for all I know, you know. Yeah. So I have seen that. Then there was a Radhabai Chaul incident in 1993. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I was here in Bombay at that point.
At that point in time. So I think this is already always been festering at a subconscious level in this country. And what we are seeing is maybe certain people reaping the benefits of that, you know. So, but I think it's also stupid to hold back history. The problem is when you start commercializing it with the film which is low on facts. That is my only problem with that, you know. I mean, if that happened in Kashmir, so it happened, so it can be shown on film.
Yeah.
But it depends on what is shown. I mean, then you show what actually happened, everything.
Absolutely.
You know, and you show both the sides. It's not only about.
And
but I guess that's
backed by government figures would have been great, you know, if they had backed it with government figures, because from what I could tell was that government figures were completely disproportionate to what was shown in the film. I'm not knocking the film. I'm just like, yeah, if you're going to fictionalize something, just say you're fictionalizing it. Don't like make it like that this is exactly what happened.
Yeah, but that is, I think that's the world that we live in. But I think almost all biopics, all historical films, a lot of them are, I think, fictionalized to a larger extent.
Yeah.
You know, very few films, I mean, maybe Gandhi is one, that kind of a film, which I felt really, you know, so there are very few films which don't do that. Because somewhere the bias of the filmmaker, the bias of the times, and what is going to make money, I think everything comes in, I guess. So what is the so why did you came to Bombay and you studied at Elphinstone College?
Elphinstone for the first year.
And there's a story to how you ended up in Elphinstone.
Yeah, I had lost my mark sheet.
You lost your mark sheet.
Yeah, but fortunately I had a certificate saying I played under 17 or under 19 basketball for the state. So based on that provisional certificate, they gave me admission. No other college was willing to give me admission. And I remember I went to college for about 3 days. And then I went back at the end of the year for a week to give my exams. And the moment I got my mark sheet, I had some enterprising friends who organized admission into HR college in next door to it, almost in town in South Bombay, and I finished my last 2 years there. But I had a lot of life experiences there, and that's where the bug for traveling actually bit me, really, where physically I could do it, because one, I was not under my parents' roof. I lived independently, and I had made certain friends who were very influential in helping me grow as a person then. One of them was my friend Ranjit, who passed away a few years back in a horrific road accident because he was either talking on his phone or he had headphones on, and a car hit him from behind. He didn't hear it.
He was on a bike.
Yeah, no, he was walking.
Oh, God.
The only reason I'm saying this is for anyone listening to this. If you think jogging or walking or running on the street while speaking on your cell phone or hearing something is cool, don't do it. It's not worth it. Well, the good part of it, Ranjit was the guy, he was a couple of years senior to us from Jamshedpur. His brother was Sanjeev Lal, who was at that point in the Himalayan, what's it called? Safari motor racing
I
Himalayan.
heard this name, yeah.
Yeah, he was part of a duo which used to win every year. They were
Okay.
part of the MRF team at that point.
Right.
So he was the one who actually, he had a Yamaha 100cc, and he used to tell me, hop on, let's go to Pune, hop on, let's go to Goa. And he kind of mentored me in my travels and taught me how to interact in our travels. And I learnt a lot from him. And that's where my real love for physically, being able to just get out whenever I wanted to. And then when I finished and I started working, I made it a point. So I was working at a production house called Durga Koti Productions, where we were doing ad films and TV serials at that point, and corporate films. Where also I got to travel because of work a bit. And then I set out on my own. And I had a fixed thing, which was do one ad film, get the balance money, get out on your bike and go for a 8-10 day journey somewhere, and then come back and then restart work. So I did that for quite a few years. And that's where my travel bug set in, because I realized better than reading self-help books.
But how did you end up in media? I mean, after college, because was it on the cards? Was it in your head that I should do something like this? What was your focus after when you were just trying to finish off? What were you thinking?
Okay, when I was trying to finish off,
Graduation,
the
that is.
pocket money I used to get from home was very little. I mean, my father was very strict about that. He would give me the bare minimum and say, if you want to have a good time, you figure out a way of...
Way to have it.
Yeah. So, one method was to make money, and I had no clue how to do it. But I loved photography. And I had a few friends who were models then in Bombay, older friends. And I used to watch them get work, and I thought maybe I could be a model. Very quickly I realized I couldn't.
And why is that?
I didn't have the discipline to exercise or eat a proper diet, or I probably didn't look like one either. I was just delusional that I could
No,
manage.
but I think you must have had a good physique even back then, because
Yeah, but it needed a lot more work which I was not ready to do. But what I did fall in love was with photography. And it so happened that my brother from one of his trips abroad brought me a camera. And I started shooting model portfolios for aspiring models. And I realized it was good money, it was quick money, and I really enjoyed doing it. And I think I was good at it. I was good behind the camera. I knew my compositions, my angles, so on and so forth. And one day I was at VT getting some thing developed at a shop called Standard Supply there. Some model portfolio, and the guy over there says, you can do this quite well. I think you've learned everything there is to learn about this fashion photography. Why don't you try moving camera? I said, but I have no idea how to go about it. He said, the building across the GPO called Walchand Hirachand Marg, there's a company called Durga Kote Productions. They're looking for assistants.
Oh, wow, really? This is
And
at what age?
this is at 20, 21.
When you had just graduated?
Yeah.
Or you were just.
Yeah. Just finished.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
So I went up and I met a young man called Lalit Asgaonkar and a lady called Mrs. Durga Kote Production, Mrs. Tina Kote at that point. And they interviewed me immediately, and the next day I had a job. And I started on ad films, corporate films. I really wanted to work with R.K. Lakshman at that point. They were doing Wagle Ki Dunya, but the money in advertising was far better than that in television. So I stuck to the ad film
With
department.
Anjan Srivastav that they did with. That Wagle Ki Dunya with Anjan Srivastav.
Yes. And Bharti Achrekar.
Bharti Achrekar, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That was the second series. The first series was made in the 80s, which came on DD.
Really?
When I went, they were making the second season, so to speak. Now, many years later, which came on Star
With the same cast.
with the same cast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this one had that Shah Rukh Khan.
No, the first one had Shah Rukh Khan.
The first one had Shah Rukh Khan. Yeah, of course, because this is later.
Yeah.
This is almost 91.
Yeah. And
You
that's
just started working with them just like that.
yeah. The next day I was at work. Of course, I was told off immediately that you can't wear ripped jeans and you can't wear torn shoes and
You were wearing ripped jeans in 1990.
Yeah, it wasn't fashion. It was my jeans had got ripped, actually ripped, and I didn't have enough money, and I was too
buy a new one.
scared of asking my parents for more money because I'd ripped my old jeans. Well, so it wasn't fashion then; it was just necessity. And to comb my hair and to shave when I come in for work, and well, things fell in place, and I learnt a lot from those people. Especially from my young boss then, Lalit Ajgaonkar, who was instrumental in making me learn whatever I did for later in life for filmmaking.
So what were you doing there?
I was initially a production boy, then worked under the production manager, then became an assistant director, then became the chief assistant director
For how many years?
for about, I think 6 years.
6 years.
Yep.
And where did you meet your wife, Pooja? Because I think it's
I
around.
had met her in college before that. We had
In
done-
HR?
in XIC.
You went to XIC?
After HR, we had done a year's course in film and TV production in XIC in Xavier's, where I had met my wife. But we met years later when we got married.
Okay, so that happened later. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay. And then were you in XIC when this Durga Kote Productions thing happened?
No, after XIC.
After XIC.
Yeah, within a few weeks.
Okay.
I had to look for a job
Ah.
because there wasn't anything else to do after that.
But you had a big flat in Bombay.
Yeah. That took care of all the fun
Yeah, but for the
and
fun you needed the money.
badass shit that we did. But apart from that, I needed to work also.
And what was your path from there, from Durga Kote? How did it go from there?
Then I quit after many years there because there was not much growth there because there was just one ad filmmaker, and in those days I think one production house had one ad filmmaker and they won't have multiple because it would cause all sorts of issues. And I went on, I started my own company called Jumpstart Productions, and luckily at that point I had a corporate client who gave me a lot of work with ad films and corporate films, and I had a few agencies who I'd worked with before who would give me work, which was more than enough money for a young couple in Bombay to survive on. And to have little bike
So you
trips
married,
also.
you were married when you were in
Yeah.
Durgakote.
When I quit, I had gotten married.
Okay.
Just after getting married, I quit. Yeah.
And then you just started your own production and you were
Yes.
doing ads.
Yes.
And how many ads have you made? I mean,
Never counted, but must have been about 40 or 50 over a period of 6-7 years. Lots of corporate film work we did. And that was the main bread and butter because ad films were difficult to come by then.
then-
For a very young person, it was difficult.
right. No, it's a very difficult industry.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if you make it big, you make it really big. Otherwise, that's the thing I tell people about the film industry. I think there's very little middle ground.
Correct.
Middle ground is for technicians, I mean, like DOPs and editors.
Yeah.
Not even editors make so much money, but I'm saying like DOPs and maybe character actors and all that. But otherwise, there's very little middle ground. You're either at the top or you're struggling for rent. There's no middle ground. So very little middle ground. So what happened after? But then you shut it down. Right?
Then we bought the house. Finally, we managed to buy this house, which we are recording in now. And we decided to have a kid. And by then, Pooja had finished a film called Ek Hasina Thi, I think.
She was the writer and
Yeah,
editor on
and-
it. Editor, no. She was the writer on that.
Writer and editor, because the editor, I think, had a medical issue in the first few months, and Pooja had to complete it, which he came back to, I think, later, which he also won awards for, and so did Pooja for her first film. But watching her, and I remember helping her, and it was the point where Ram Gopal Verma came into our lives, and he was at the peak of his career,
Just shook the industry.
and with Satya and all that. And I fell in love with the whole idea of filmmaking. I mean, I realized advertising and corporate films is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do feature films. And I went on and assisted Mr. Shivam Nair on a film called Maharathi then,
Yeah, Boman Irani and Paresh Rawal and I guess
Nasruddin Shah and Om Puri.
Right.
I mean, a stellar cast.
Yeah.
And the girls were there too, Neha Dupia and Tara Sharma.
It's a single location thriller.
Yes. And before we could finish the edit of that, I had been offered my first film.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I kind of hopped over to start my own film. And
Which was?
Aa Dekhe Zara.
Oh, that was the. Okay, you're still talking about Aa Dekhe Zara. Okay.
Still no, it was the only film I made. So that's all
No.
can
I
talk
thought there
about.
was some other film that you were being.
No,
being
Maharathi.
offered.
So I finished that and I started.
Okay.
Aa
By
Dekhe
that
Zara.
time, Johnny Gaddar had released and.
Long before. Yeah. Long
Okay, and Neil Nitin Mukesh was a star in a way.
Yeah.
So, right. So, Aa Dekhe Zara is this. I'm sure quite a few of you have seen the film, and
More likely not seen. Yeah.
no. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It's a science fiction film, and it's a rare genre in the Bombay film industry to make science fiction because it's very difficult to find producers for science fiction. And Jay made that film, and it had what was the female cast?
Bipasha Basu.
Bipasha Basu, right? Bipasha Basu and Neil Nitin Mukesh. That was the cast of that film. And how did that happen? I mean, what happened?
How did that happen? I was doing Maharathi and everyone around me was, why don't you write yourself? Why don't you direct yourself? Because I had done 10-15 years of direction before that
Right, in ads.
in ads and substantial amount. And I realized where I lacked was in the writing. The actual execution and shooting was not something I really needed to work on. It was writing that I needed to work on because that's a completely different kettle of tea. And it's been so long, I'm trying to remember. Well, I got the opportunity. Eros called me and said, would you like to direct this film? Because I was one of the names suggested by Neil Nitin Mukesh, I think, at that point. And I said, sure. And I read the script, which was written by two boys who've gone on to make films themselves. And I liked the concept of the film, which was finding a camera which takes photographs of the future or the past, depending on how you set it.
So finding a camera which takes photographs of the future or
Future
the
past, depending on the dates you set it on.
Okay.
And so I went with that, and well, things happened really fast. And within a few weeks, we were shooting. So I had a few weeks to rewrite the entire film with the writers because the way it was not something I was very keen on. And I think in 2 months we began shooting, and the first schedule was abroad. And
in Thailand, I remember you telling me the story.
And going there without doing too much prep, we just had 2 or 3 days of recce. And being an inexperienced director, one made a lot of mistakes on my own, and which some were inflicted on by others. But made the most of it and completed the film over a period of a year and released it. I had spectacularly bad luck with both Marathi and Aa Dekhe Zara, because Marathi released on the Friday during the weekend of the Mumbai terror attacks.
Oh.
And Aa Dekhe Zara released on the Friday when the multiplex strike happened. And the producers chose to go ahead with the release instead of hold back, though it was specifically made for multiplex. And the film, I think, broke even. I'm pretty sure it broke even and did okay. And for years I've heard about it on in-flights and on television channels, so I'm sure the producers made their money on it. But it didn't get me anywhere. And I sort of realized at the end of it that maybe filmmaking isn't the thing for me right then, because I was only 36 at that point of time, and I had a lot to learn still. And birth of my son happened, and I decided that I would look after him for a couple of years, and that went on, and so lived in semi-retirement since then.
But to you, I mean, I don't know. I think you are extremely talented. I mean, I don't mean it even because as a flattery, but I honestly feel, because I've read your scripts. I'm not just saying it. If you're not doing them, give them to me. I'll find producers and I will make those films. फिर बोल मत बाद में, क्योंकि मेरे पास सब पड़ा हुआ है मेरे लैपटॉप पे. Yeah, but
no problem. As long as the IPL stays with me, you can have whichever story you want. Yeah.
No. But I feel that you should make them yourself, because I think it's high time now that you need to get out of this semi-retired mode or whatever mode you think you're in, and make films. I mean, because there are a lot of crap happening anyway. I mean, even if you feel that I'm not doing a great job, I can assure you that there is enough crap for you to do. But now we can, I think, and what... do you regret the way it happened? I mean, the way Aa Dekhe Zara...
No, I think I was too young and I didn't know how to put my foot down. As one of the big actors said, Jeh is one of the nicest directors I've worked with. When they said it, I was feeling really great. But then I understood what it really meant. That being nice is not going to get you anywhere. You need to be stern and strict and be very sure of how you release your film, where you release your film, and how you go about the entire process. At that point, I think it became a money-making exercise rather than making a good film. And that was also the era when a lot of the film companies were having their IPOs. So I think number crunching meant a lot to a lot of those companies rather than actually making good films.
Yeah, but I think filmmaking is, at the end of it, it's a business. I mean,
Absolutely.
if it's a, I mean, if somebody's
Absolutely.
put in 10, he expects a 12 because
Yeah, but
it's just too much money. I mean,
yeah,
it's unlike anything else that we do, and like any other art, because it doesn't cost much to make a painting or take a picture, or but filmmaking, I think, is expensive from that perspective.
absolutely. So you have to make sure that you can extract every penny from it.
Right.
You should not, one should not be happy knowing that there are 5 songs and a great trailer and that they can con people into the first week to come and occupy the seats. And whether they like it or not, it doesn't matter as long as the seat has been sold, which is what the industry became at that point. Uh,
I feel that's always the industry. I mean, was it the industry
no,
was
I
never
think
different.
a lot of people are breaking that mold. You need clout to do that, and you need to be
Right,
successful
right,
to do
right.
that. And those who have clout, unfortunately, are also becoming businessmen as well as filmmakers, which is perfectly all right. But then there is a certain, I think, depreciation in the quality of the film that's being made. I mean, for whatever it's worth, people are still talking about Ek Hasina Thi or Johnny Gaddar
Absolutely.
today.
Andhadhund. I mean, all Sriram Raghavan
Andhadhun.
films. I mean,
Yeah,
if you just.
yeah. Uh, but there are umpteen amount of films which probably made 10 times the amount of money, which I wouldn't remember at all, which I've seen maybe a year ago or
Right.
2 years ago. So, see, that argument is always there, Atul. But you have to decide which side of the fence you sit on. There are a lot of fence sitters who want to make money also and make good films also. Some of them manage, some of them don't. But you generally are successful only if you have some clout. And for a young person to break through that, it's difficult. And amongst the 1.5 billion, maybe a couple of hundred get that opportunity. And it's difficult. I have no regrets. I gave it my best shot. Maybe I'll try again. Now that maturity, I'm a little more mature. Uh, but let's see how it goes.
And you're continuously working on your scripts. I mean, I know that you continuously work on your scripts anyway. So, from that perspective,
Yeah,
so the time is there.
absolutely.
So, how has it been now? I think there's this other part of you which we can talk about, which is about your relationship with your son. His name is Adar. And how have you, like, you have looked after him for all these years? I mean, you have been like part of you has been a stay-at-home parent also, right? And now he is growing up. When he is 15, 17, he's going to have a different life. I mean, once he goes out of the house, he starts going to college, or maybe he goes abroad, whatever he does, he's going to have a different life. And what is the process that you ended up taking this road trip with your son, with a 14-year-old son, which I think is not many parents do, like on a bike, travel for about 10 days, 12 days, and just try to get a bonding experience with your son. How did it come about? Where do you see this? And if you can give us a little background in it.
Okay, Atul, being a Bawa, first I love my bike like crazy. I have a KTM Adventure 390. Atul, the thing is, as you said, we talked earlier about privilege, good part of privilege. I've got a lot of experiences which have been about character building in my life. And lately, with my son now in his mid teens, I've always been wondering, like, how can I substitute or give him experiences which will be character building for him right now? Because I think it's really important at age 14, 15, 16 for a kid to experience stuff which makes him analyze or think about where his life or her life is headed. And the choice was to be at work, and in our work we are 24/7, 365 days of the year at work. So, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't want my child to grow up with drivers and maids. I wish to do it myself because that's the most important gift a parent can give their child is time and share all their positive experiences and lessons learned from negative experiences. The other thing is being a Bawa, I love my food and I like trying all different types of food. And travel is one sure way of doing it. And I've realized that going to high end restaurants isn't where you're going to learn about food, it's about going to normal people's houses in different districts in India and eating their food locally made produced with locally produced masala or local catch where you really get to learn the flavors of food. Now I wanted my son to have all of this now. As you know, I've had severe medical issues in the past decade and before I grow too old to ride a bike or he becomes too big to take as a pillion, I wanted to do this trip with him. And there will be more in future, though probably he'll have his own vehicle then, once he's old enough to get his license. So this was the reason I wanted to go with him. The other thing was that in my earlier years, when I started going out on the bike on these trips, whether it was Bangalore, Mangalore, for by us I mean my regular bike partner is my wife's uncle, who's 15 years older than me, who taught me a lot in my mid 30s when we started doing it on these trips about how to deal with people, how to behave outside of an urban scenario. Because it's completely different out in the villages and smaller towns than it is here. And perceptions, expectations are different. So he taught me a lot about how to go about things. In fact, with him, we used to not even book a place. We would go to people's houses and request them to sleep on the veranda for the night. And we'd end up with a bed and room. And then they would feed us dinner and breakfast. And that was something which was amazing. And we'd leave a little something behind for people on our travels. I wanted my son to also experience this kind of travel, to see the kind of people there are in this world outside of the metros. So I'm going to try and sum it up by saying I wanted to share the good stuff I had learned with and pass it on to him by not telling him but showing him actually how it works. And yes, being out in the sun for an urban kid in harsh conditions also brings out the best or worst in them, where he would get to learn about himself a little more. Because let's face it, nothing like harsh times to show how much strength you have in you. And I wanted him to experience that. And but because of my health issues, I had to take a relatively safe route, which was between Mumbai and Goa. I didn't want to do something too strenuous where I would break down, and being the only rider, it would have been difficult for us. So we decided to do the coastal route from Mumbai to Goa without taking any of the major highways or state highways, by going completely along the coast on village roads. And wherever the creeks were, we took ferries across. The ferry services in Maharashtra is great. So a shout out to the Maharashtra government for improving the ferry services from here to Goa. Very professional, very well organized, very safe. And the internal roads were amazing. So shout out to Mr. Gadkari also, who's probably had played a major part in fixing all these roads. The main roads are being fixed, and I chose not to take them because they're boring as hell. And You don't meet people there. They're barricaded. You're just going from point A to point B. And I've done that before in a car with my son. I wanted him to actually meet people, see people, go to small shops, go to hotels. So I decided he was going to be in charge of the money and the budgets, and I would ride the bike and look after the luggage and rainwear, etc. And in this scenario. And so we chose this wiggly worm going all the way down. And
Here, I would just like to say something is that for people who do Bombay Goa a lot, there are two ways of going by road. One is that if you take the Bombay Goa highway, which goes through all these places like Managaon, Chippadon, and all these places.
terrible condition.
And those roads are in terrible conditions because I've traveled on those roads, and that's a fairly common road for people to take. The other is to go via Pune and Kolhapur, and then go via Amboli and then end up in Goa. So there are these two roads. What I think Jay is talking about is taking a completely different route, which includes a lot of ferries, where you can take your bike on it, you can take your car on it also, right?
Yes.
So you can also take your car on it, and he did almost 3 ferries, if I'm not mistaken. Then he took a completely different road, which was not really. It took 5 ferries. So that is how. That is what he's talking about. So this wiggly road that you're talking about.
Yeah.
What was it? How was it?
So we started off from Warsaw here. We went to Bhaucha
Warsaw in Bombay.
Yes.
Right.
Bhaucha Dhaka, where we took the fancy Ro-Ro ferry, which is very nice, to Mandwa.
To Mandwa.
And from Mandwa, we went to Revdanda Fort. And from Revdanda Fort, we went to Murud. And from Murud, we went to Agardanda Jetty, where we took another ferry to Dighi. And the first night, we stayed on a relatively unknown beach called Aravi Beach.
So this is your first day. So
First
what
day.
we should do here is we should just break down your journey in terms of days. And if there was
Exactly,
any
that's what I'm
specific,
doing.
there's any specific experience that was there when you did that. Even within that journey, even when on a bike, if something happened or somewhere where you felt that your son may have learned something, or there was learning for you, and which was different from what it was. So from here you went to Bhaucha Dhaka, from there Bhaucha Dhaka you took a Ro-Ro ferry and went to Mandwa, which is a fairly common road for people to go to Alibag.
Correct.
Right. So from there what happened?
From there, we drove down the coast, and the Revdanda Fort was amazing to see. Then Murud, Janjira, the Agardanda Jetty we went to, and that's where we took our first local ferry, which is like a barge, which was an amazing experience. That was like a 40-minute trip, and including waiting, buying the ticket, and fairly smooth process. And that's where both of us realized that these barges, which we were traveling on, were amazingly, they were handled by the locals there, and they were really nice to us and kind, and made sure that we got shade and that the vehicle won't fall over or anything like that. So I let my son experience that, and he was lucky enough to meet the Top Gear India BBC group on it, who were shooting videos of some new car to be launched. So he got to see them running all the equipment, and a film crew working, a documentary crew working on the boat and on land, which was also interesting. But the barge itself and traveling with your vehicle on it, I mean, I cannot describe to you how happy both of us felt traveling on it, and the calmness that it brought to, because the rest of it is quite hectic and unknown roads where anything could happen. A cow could step out, a villager could walk across the road, whereas this was smooth sailing. But it was a new experience for us, and it really recharged us. I mean, what I can say is you need to experience this. The Ro-Ro ferry is a commercial service, so it was everything was expected on it. But this was something else. And to see the hills in the background and the sea and the islands, it was completely different. And the first night, so Adar had his first experience of a beach with black sand there at Aravi Beach, which goes on towards Srivardhan, where he's only used to seeing white sand beaches.
Right.
And we learnt from the hotel owner there, the sand is really good for people with arthritis or back problems, where you could lie down on the beach and put it on you, the wet sand, and it has sort of
Healing properties.
I mean, I don't know how much of that is true, but we were really tired, so it was really nice putting
Healing anyway.
the mud on our thighs and calves. So that was a lovely experience, and also it was a small fishing village, not much to do over there. The host of the hotel, the owner, was really nice to us. They were happy to see tourists because it's the end of the tourist season, and all of them came and chatted with us incessantly, and we enjoyed it. And we had our first fish thali there, which I thought was going to be a regular feature, which it was. But we discovered that every district we passed through where we had a fish thali had completely different flavors, though it was exactly the same thing. Local produce, masalas, local fish, the rice, quality of rice,
It's all different.
the dal is different at every district, whether it's Malwan, Sindhudurg, Vijayadurg, Alibag, you name it, and it would be different. So that was an eye-opener even for me. So that was a nice experience. And then on our travels, we kept passing through all the mango orchards. And we realized that it's the end of the season and the farmers were taking all the mangoes off. There were several on the road which had just fallen off, which you could pick up and just eat if you wanted to. But they were all hafus mangoes. And they were selling them right there and then for nominal amounts. And one of the ladies even said, you can buy the slightly raw ones because we are selling those. The ripe ones, by the time we transport them, they're finished. So feel free, as many as you can pick up, you can take the ripe ones, as long as you buy raw. And we had the good fortune of seeing the Devbagh Hafus, the Alibagh Hafus, the Devgarh Hafus, Devbagh Hafus. They're all different. Ratnagiri Hafus. They're all different types of hafuses, under different soil conditions, different shapes, sizes, and flavors too. And this was something, which, though I've lived here 30 years in the city, we've just bought hafus mango,
Without knowing the difference.
without knowing where it comes from.
Right.
So that was interesting for my son too, to see that and to know that on a random road you could pick up a fruit which had fallen down and eat it, open it up with your penknife and eat it without any hesitation. There were huge amounts of jackfruit trees along the way. Then there were farms which had other sorts of vegetables which he got to see. Unfortunately, I had my eyes on the road, so I could only see that much and no more. But it gave him a chance to see and make him wonder also, because he didn't see houses close by. So he was wondering how villagers traveled, how they walked, and how hard our farmers work to get what we eat here to us and to actually grow it.
Right.
It was a good experience for him. Then on day 2, we started from there and went through
Started from where?
Aravi Beach.
Aravi Beach. Okay.
Towards Harihareshwar, and we went to a small village called Kelshi, which is like a little corner beach where we'd stayed earlier. So we met the people we stayed earlier, said hi to them, continued from there to Harnai, Dapoli, and we ended up at Dhabol Jetty.
Which was the Enron project.
Yes. Also, that's where we first saw all the major industries that are on the beach fronts.
Right.
Because that black soil is obviously very valuable. and we saw a few steel factories also on the way.
You stopped at Haryareshwar? No.
Short stop.
Okay. It's a lovely beach and a lovely temple, actually.
Actually, all these places are beaches.
Yeah, yeah.
So we were
but
traveling-
Haryareshwar, because I used to go there earlier for religious reasons. Now I'm tired, but I'm saying that with my parents. And in Haryareshwar, there's this amazing beach. There's a Peshwa temple which was built during the Peshwa times. And there's this. If you go on the top, and there's this two mountains, and in the middle there is the sea.
Correct.
If you climb down you went there from the steps.
No, we didn't, but I've been there.
Yeah, so that's beautiful actually in Haryareshwar. So you stopped at the end. You stopped at Dhapul.
No, we didn't. We continued on to Dhobave and then went to Tawasel, where we took another ferry to Jaigarh. And we saw the Jaigarh fort there and went to a small beach there called Malgunde Beach, where we stayed, which was an amazing stay. That was day 2. That was about 195 kilometers in totality with 2 ferries in the day. So that was also fun because we actually rode only till lunchtime or so. We ate lunch, we found a place to stay, we slept, then we went for a swim on the beach, then we ate, then we slept again, and we started again on the 3rd day. This time we went through from Malgunde Beach. Actually, we took a turn and went onto the state highway, which was a bad judgment call by me because I thought we'd get quicker to Goa. And also my son was a little tired of all the beaches because he had seen at least 15 beaches by the time we reached there. So we went inwards and the road condition was terrible. But about 100 kilometers before Goa they had completed the coastal road there. So that stretch of the highway was good straight into Goa. And in Goa, we stayed 2 days with our friends, which we did not much. We just slept and ate and were pampered thoroughly by my local friends there.
So 3rd day you were in Goa.
3rd night,
3rd night you were in Goa.
Goa. Yeah. And so 3rd night, 4th night, 5th night, we stayed in Goa. And I even met some of my neighbors from Mumbai over there. So I had a nice
Get
together there. And Adar and I have some favorite eating places in Goa, which we visited too for a bite. Though most of it is shutting down, preparing for the monsoon. And then on our ride back, we decided that the coast that we missed, because we had taken the state highway, we would go by that coast up to Ganpati Phule. And that was the best journey because we went through Vengurla and it was stunning. Vengurla, Devbag, and it had the most amazing beaches, clean beaches. There were white sand beaches there.
Right.
And there were still quite a few tourists there, so food was easily available. And the Malwan thalis were to die for. It was the best thalis we ate. I mean, all the other district thalis were also good, but the Malwan one was by far the best.
Okay, I just want to clarify for people who I don't know whether thali is a concept outside of Maharashtra and Rajasthan, so I'm not really sure about that. But what a thali means here, and when you say that you had this thali, it means that there is rice. So sorry, it doesn't start like this way. There is a curry, which is a fish curry. If you say if I want a fish thali, like you want a surmai thali, then there is a surmai fish. Okay, like salmon thali, for example. So you'll have there will be a curry, which is a red curry, coconut-based red curry, which will be there with a fish which is not fried, but in the curry. It's a curry fish. Then there will be a fried fish, a huge fried fish that will be there with it. And then there will be a certain kind of chapati, or there will be something called a bread, which you can call bread, which is chapatis, or a local thing which is called bhakri, which is a far thicker version of a chapati actually, and which is made only on a tawa. It's that kind of a thing. And then to top it off, you have something called a sol curry, at the end, which is basically kokum. I don't know what the word for kokum is in English, but you make a certain kind of concoction with that, which is, because I am from that area, so I know how that is, what that is, and that you just drink like that. It's made with coconut and kokum. Okay, and finally there is rice which you can have with that red curry which was there, and you can also have it with the kokum curry which is there. So it's that is what a thali is, just for people who wouldn't know. Yeah. So you went there, and those Malwan thalis were to die for. You
To
said,
die for, absolutely. Whether it was the chicken one or the fish one.
because the chicken is not your boiler chicken normally. It is what you call gouty chicken.
Country chicken.
Country chicken. So it tastes very different from poultry chicken, which is like fed and within 7 days they become big, or 10 days, so it's very different. Yeah.
So it was like a culinary journey. Plus there were all the different Maratha forts that we saw, which was amazing. And the different beaches, which was also amazing. I mean, I chose to stay away from any religious places. We saw a few mosques, we saw a lot of temples, we saw a couple of churches, but I decided to stay away from that because we have enough of that in our real lives. We wanted to see God's creation, not necessarily
Man's creation.
man's creation of him.
That's a
Yeah.
super way to put it, yeah.
And so that was it. I mean, just sitting with your 14-year-old son, tired on the beach, staring out into the distance without anything in your mind. And we didn't talk much on the trip because there was so much he was assimilating and analyzing and absorbing that I didn't want to disturb that process of his, because I wanted it, assisted by me, but I wanted the process to be his own. Yeah. So that was the main thing about this trip.
From there, after you reached Ganpati Phule, you took the state highway.
Yeah,
The
from
national highway,
Ganpati
actually.
Phule, I made the same mistake we made whilst coming, saying maybe the state highway is better. And
It's a terrible road.
and we came on that, which was a terrible road, which is
So you
being
crossed
built.
through Mangaon and all these places, and you came, right?
Yeah. And there's one thing, we stayed at a couple of hotels which were Maharashtrian owned, and their children were running it, which were amazing, in the middle of nowhere, but they're running it so professionally, so well, have maintained that local flavor, and are so kind and helpful, especially to people like us on the bike, who they could tell we were exhausted every time we reached there. So on our way back, I'd like to mention one place. It was called Madachya Banat, which means grove of
Madacha
coconut.
Vanat.
Yeah.
Madacha Vanat. What did you say?
Madachya Banat.
MADA.
Yeah. Which
Madacha
is a
Vanat.
grove of mango,
Maharaja.
grove of coconut trees.
Coconut trees. What's the word
Yes.
for that? Okay, I got it. Yeah.
So we stayed
Vanat
there.
is forest. One is
Yeah.
forest. as
Yeah.
in
So we
Marathi.
repeated that hotel.
Where was this?
This was outside Ganpati Phule,
Okay.
near Ganpati Phule, and just that people were so caring and affectionate, and also it's the warmth when you meet people outside the city, where it doesn't take even a few seconds for it to show up. Where in the city, the hustle bustle. So that was something I wanted him also to see, that there is a brighter side to life apart from the cutthroat business that you see here in the city. And since he was handling the money, he got first-hand experience of that. And for example, one place where he was paying the bill, at this place only, in fact, Madachya Banat, the owner's kid who was handling the place took 200 rupees less from other, and he was completely confused. So other said, but you said that much and now you're taking less. So he said, your dad said y'all are leaving early in the morning, means y'all won't have breakfast here. So I don't want to charge y'all
Wow.
for it. And I could see his face, like, and he was, I knew he's going to
Overwhelmed
turn
with this.
overwhelmed, and he would turn around and say, but he could have just kept it. So I wanted him to experience small things like this.
Right.
Because this was our first trip, I didn't want to go do the cold call in somebody's house in a village, because it would have been too much. And we weren't carrying our sleeping bags. Normally,
Right.
we carry our sleeping bags. This time, we had to carry rain gear instead of sleeping bags because we were expecting the monsoon to hit us. Of course, it rained nowhere except 3 kilometers from my house. Yeah. So that was interesting. And,
So what? Yeah. So what have you? It seems like it was a 9-day journey, right? That's what you
Yeah.
said. A total 9-day journey that you with your son. So what did you learn anything new about your son because it's a different process, right? Even for you.
yes.
Even you are internalizing
Yes.
it at some level, and you're seeing the process, and you have never spent time with your son like a colleague. In this case, you're more of a colleague than you're a
Partner.
father. You're a partner.
biking partner.
You're a biking partner. So what did you learn about your son from this,
I learned a lot about myself.
and about yourself also?
Yeah, from my son, I let him be, because being a stay-at-home dad for so many years, I'm all the time in his face. I wanted to be close, but not intrusive in this process. So just as a safety net, no more. Not as a guide, not as a mentor, but just a safety net.
Right.
And
हो
let,
गया तो मैं है.
huh,
If something happens, I'm there. That's
yeah. And there are times where I let him intentionally make some mistakes while handling the money. And later on, whilst we were riding, I would kind of bring up the topic and mention, maybe you should have left a tip there. They were very helpful. Or maybe you shouldn't have tipped there. They were very rude. Or maybe he charged you a little more than, did you check the bill? Or things like that, smaller things. But what I learned about myself was that as a parent, you have to learn to let go of your children and let them experience things
for themselves.
for themselves, fall down, hurt themselves, and stand back up. I have a ringside view of this amongst all our friends because Adar is the baby in our friends group. He's one of the last born children. So I have, of the older children, I've seen they either get pampered too much or their parents are too strict with them. There's no middle ground. There's no balance. I think I've said this before, but this trip was about for me to cut the umbilical cord with him
Oh wow.
and make him into a lad, a boy, a man now, start his journey of manhood by dealing with people. And yes, it's been a week since we've been back, and I'm seeing the difference. The confidence is amazing. The way he's speaking to people, dealing with people, interpersonal relationships, there's a huge upturn. I hope that continues for him. And the journey now may not be with his father all the time, maybe a few steps back, and as I grow older, those steps will get further and further away from him, and he will be confident enough to handle things on his own and take decisions for himself on his own and know right from wrong. And yes, he will have to learn how to hustle too. I'm terrible at that, but giving him these experiences, maybe he'll figure out
Things
how
for
to
himself.
how to hustle as well. I mean, everything is not right and wrong. There are some gray areas where he will need to hustle. And I think that he has to figure out for himself. Because I'm not good at hustling. So that will come up on his own.
And there's something else which I think, before I forget to mention this, and because me and Jay meet pretty regularly, I mean, at least once in 3 months, 6 months, we do catch up. And I think a long time back, when Jay himself was passing through his own parents', final days or whatever, and then he came and we had this small conversation which I remembered, where you mentioned something else here, where you said it's about the gift of time, that you wanted to give him, or he, that was. So it is something very similar which Jay did with his parents. At the end of it, when I think his one of his parents passed away, and we had this conversation, and he said that is all that your parents are looking for in their old age.
Absolutely.
That they are just looking to get, to spend some time with you. And that is something which I thought was very important, because and I did that myself. And it's not that I wouldn't have probably done it if Jay had not told me, but I'm saying that it's important to understand this, because when 4 years back, my parents were sick, and I just went and started living with them in Thana, and it's further from the industry. And I realized that it matters to them if you are close to them. I mean, of course, I understand that children have careers, and children have other things, and they have their own family to look after. But if you can, I think if you can make that little leeway, that give that little time to your parents in their old age, I think they are more grateful than anything. I mean, and it's a very strange word to use, but that is the only thing that matters to them.
Absolutely. Atul, another thing is to teach your children how to fly, and let them fly, and let them of their own accord come back to you on their own terms, as opposed to holding on to your children all the time.
Right. And that is what is happening now. I mean, if you remember our childhood, Jay, I mean, it was very different from the childhood that children have today. I see the parents of my friends who have children, and they are always in their face. They know everything. So it's also, I'm not really sure. I understand, because people have lesser children today, and they are also a little more worried than than the parents of our age, because our parents were always hustling. Like, the right word is hustling. My parents were always hustling. Your parents were always hustling. So and the technology was not there. So I could be like 5 kilometers away from home, but the only from 4 to 7:30 I could be anywhere in the evening. At 7:30 I had to be home. That is when they panicked. If I was not at 7:30, I was not at home. That is the time to panic. But 4 to 7:30, I could have gone to Agra and come back, and nobody cared. So
Atul, how come you haven't asked me about how did you manage without Wi-Fi and phone signal?
no, I don't think it's a big deal. Everybody can manage.
You have no idea when you're on a bike trip and you're relying on GPS. That's
okay.
when I pulled out my old map, pre-mobile phone navigation, and that's what helped us, because there was no signal, there was
Nobody to ask.
nobody to ask, and there was no Wi-Fi if you didn't have signal. So that was
Because
also
you're off the state highway. You're off the national highway.
Yeah, we were off the grid.
You're off the grid.
And a couple of years back, the cyclone Nisarg has knocked off most of the towers along the coast.
Right.
So only the hotels have Wi-Fi, and some of them work, some of them don't. And obviously, if you're not staying in the hotel, they're not going to give you the Wi-Fi password. But so that was also something I wanted him to experience, not having a phone in his hand all the time, and
Right.
to look around and to not just Google things, look around and try and find them for himself. And because I think that's what we did, and that also was character building in its own way. Finding your own path, literally and figuratively. And initially we were a little upset that, oh my God, how can there be no phone signal here? But we learned by and by that you don't need it to survive. You can manage without it. And you can manage without television too.
Yeah, because phone signals and the GPS is only a 10-year-old thing. I mean, people have been doing it for centuries. I mean, So people have come from Iran. Your own, so, has come. Parsis have come from all the way from Persia and landed in Gujarat very easily. I mean, they knew where they were going to land. So I guess it was always happening.
On a personal level, the other thing I've gotten out of this is I want to learn how to produce solar energy, because I realized that with coal deficiencies and other forms of uh, electricity production decreasing, energy is going to be the future. I know
Yes.
we've been saying it for 30 years now, but I think we've come to that time where if you don't know what it's about, you're going to suffer in a couple of years or maybe a decade. And that's something I would like to learn more about and figure out how to harness. So that's one of the things that personally, on a personal level, I thought of on this trip. Because a lot of places had power cuts and they have generators where they're buying fuel, which is very, very expensive for them. And where if they had set up solar power panels, it could have been far easier. So, on a personal note, that is something I'd like to look into after this trip. And I don't know, maybe go and share my knowledge with a couple of people along the way.
And now, this seems like a kind of a bonding experience for both you and your son. So, where does it go from here? Well, how do you see the next, at least till your son finds other friends, where do you see this going?
Well, it's another 3 years before he'll get his license. So I would like to do this trip again, maybe not so quickly in 9 days, maybe take 15 days and visit some of the forts which we missed. Yes, some of the temples, some of the mosques. And also there were some heritage sites along the way which I missed. There's another thing I wanted to go and see was where the last Burmese family were resettled in Ratnagiri.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a house there where they were resettled, which I had read about. I'd like to go and have a look at that, and maybe go a little further down south towards Gokarna, and because that used to be my haunt in my
Oh, really?
20s and
Oh, wow.
30s. Yeah, when there was only one known beach and all the others were
Yeah,
hidden
now
beaches.
it's a commercial place, Gokarna, yeah.
Yeah, but it would be nice to go back there. So that's another thing. And of course, the mecca of it all, doing the Leh Ladakh, Spiti Valley thing,
Spiti
which
Valley.
probably I won't do with him. I will probably do it with my wife's uncle, Ashit, who's my biking partner. So either I have people who are much older than me or much younger than me as company. And trust me, I learn the most on these trips through them. So that's
So
where
it's
it's headed.
diversity at a different level for you.
Yes.
It's not.
And also, to be honest, but I finally found a vehicle which is not overpowered, not underpowered, and can handle Indian roads in whatever condition they may be in, and is stable. At my age, I want a vehicle which is stable. I don't want something fast or slow or tough or whatever. It just needs to keep going. And earlier I had a 1971 Bullet which I used to travel on, which used to break down once in a while. But now I need something very, very stable which will not break down. And so that is also a huge element of these trips, having something comfortable to travel in. I'm not looking at a fancy Mercedes. I just want my simple bike, which is strong enough to handle ghats, a little water if you have to cross a river, and the cross country we do on some of our roads, which are not made at all. So, I mean, the equal part to be shared with the vehicle. And the more you respect your vehicle, the more it'll respect your journey.
Right, right. And what about your own personal journey? I mean, because are you still a filmmaker or are you still a writer? Because I don't really care about your IP, or I might just steal your scripts, I mean, you never know, Jay, so I'm saying, where are you going there in that personal journey of being a filmmaker?
I'll do two more of these trips and I'll have an answer for you. Yeah, because like I took this trip for my son. Yes, I learned a lot too. But I have realized that in my earlier years, I used to do a lot of these trips to do my own soul searching. And I need to do a little more of that soul searching now.
Okay.
Because with my health issues, heart and spine related, um, I need to think about how I'm going to go about it if I'm going to get back into the stressful situation of directing a film. It has to be on my terms, at least physically. Mentally, yes, we can do whatever has to be done. But physically, for me to manage, to get back to work, I have to give it some thought.
But my view is that you have.
But then again, Atul, you can sit for 2 hours a day on the stock market and make as much and more money than you can do filmmaking. So that's another element.
But is that the same kick?
Never, never, never.
So
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter. All the
like-
money in the world doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like a lot of people ask me, how do you get your money? So I say, I get my money, but I don't work. Because whatever I do for my pleasure. It's not like I have tons of it lying around. I have the basic amount and I've done some smart investments. We lead simple middle class lives. This is where we spend our money. And I'd love to go biking in the Alps, but since I can't do that, I'll do it on the ghats over here.
Right.
But I'm going to do it any other ways. And always looking to do something unconventional. Even my lifestyle is very unconventional, Atul. A lot of people have difficulty understanding that, especially my friends who are growing old and more regressive now. They find it very difficult to understand. But, well, it works for me. So if you're a friend, you'll be happy for me. It's
Yes,
as
but
simple
what's
as
the
that.
point of leading a life which somebody else understands? I mean, the whole idea of life is to understand it yourself.
Yeah.
And then if
No,
you are happy with
yeah.
it and if you are comfortable with it, I don't think you should give a damn.
Absolutely. No, there are people in your lives who you spend huge portions of your life with, who you would like them to be proud of you or respect your decisions. Because I do respect decisions of most of my friends who work very hard at doing what they do, irrespective of their circumstances.
Or ideologies.
No, that is where I draw the line. Yeah.
Yes, but I think these are. I mean, it's not only about the kind of political climate that is there in this country. I'm saying it's also about that people grow distant. That's my view. That we may have spent a certain, like I have spent a lot of time with my friends in college, but they need not understand my decisions. They need not understand the kind of life that I am trying to lead, or I don't find it relevant at all to my life. But we can still be very good friends. I mean, that doesn't stop us from being very good friends. So I understand where you're coming from, that you would like, because finally I don't know in what film, or I think it's in How I Met Your Mother, where Barney says this, that what's the point of being famous if you're not famous with your friends? I mean, or something like that. That what it matters is that the people you know all your life think you're famous. I mean, it's not in the same context, but I'm saying that is where you're coming from, that your friends matter, your family matters. It's, if a stranger comes and tells you made a great Aa Dekhe, zaraa, that's a different kind of kick from when a very good friend comes and tells you that, oh, I really liked your film and I really loved it, and all that you're working for all these years, because they have seen your struggle from up close, and they know exactly what you went through. And I think that's a different kick.
Yeah.
And these are two completely different kicks that one gets out of life.
No, Atul, to be famous, there are many methods and ways now to be famous. To be happy is what I'm looking for. And I found it, happiness to a great degree. I want more of it. Why can't I have more happiness?
Absolutely.
Why do I have to stop at just being happy? Why can't I be ecstatic?
Yeah.
And why can't I make the most of what time I have left? And you know me, after two major life-threatening surgeries, I appreciate it even more.
Yeah.
I want more happiness. I don't want the money. I want happiness. And I don't want recognition for what I do, but I don't want people to come in the way of my happiness either. You know?
But that's up to you.
And I work on it. I try and keep the toxic people out of my life and wean them away because that's one of the fuck ups of being unconventional.
Right.
I noticed that being unconventional and happy is not something most people can swallow. They find it difficult to accept and they turn slightly toxic or sarcastic towards you because they don't understand it. You get it. But as a person, if I don't understand someone, I'm not going to turn toxic. It's just that I'm smart enough to say I don't understand it and let it be.
Yeah, but I think the solution to that is to just give a fuck. I mean, I don't think there's any other solution to that other than that. I mean,
See, most of the people I look up to are badass guys, whether it's James Dean or Alain Delon or Anthony Bourdain or Gordon Ramsay. They're all unconventional blokes with a lot of aggression. I'd like to be like one of them, but without the aggression. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but the aggression is a part of their personality. That's
Yeah.
why they are like that. It's a package.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know how you can be
Wild,
You
but not violent.
Yeah, you can try, but I feel that it's everything is a package. Everything comes with its a share of pluses and minuses and fits and misfits. So I would look at it a little differently there.
I've been fucking given one life. I make the most of it.
Absolutely. But what you
I
said,
try my best.
yeah, but what you said, I think, is something similar because I'm as very close to my friends. I'm still very close to my friends, but the kind of atmosphere that was there, and I didn't agree with a lot of things that were happening or that were being shared, and on a WhatsApp group, in college groups, in my MBA group or wherever, and one fine day I just quit. And I think that is what you did too. But I'm saying that one fine day I just got out and I realized that the world is better because I am not seeing it anymore. So even if you are a kind of person that I don't like, you are becoming a kind of person or that I don't really appreciate. So if I'm not in, and then when I meet them outside and and a one-on-one, it's a very good experience. It's not a bad experience at all. Because people, I think, behave very differently in groups and they behave very differently one-on-one. So that's my view on
Why
this.
does this feel like I'm interviewing you now and you're doing the soul searching?
Because this is a conversation, so I try to search my soul through your through your experiences. So this is what I've learned from this conversation that we had today, Jay, and it was a pleasure to talk with you because we've been friends for a long time, and it was a pleasure to hear about your life before the things which I never know, particularly about all that grandparent, and I had no idea that you come from such a family, and it was amazing. And
Don't get me wrong, they geesoed their ass to get to whatever they did. And I guess as grandchildren, we are enjoying the benefits. But which was responsibly passed down generation to generation. I mean, nothing's come free. There's no financial inheritance, but yes, knowledge inheritance, experience inheritance, exposure inheritance. There's been plenty of which I've been very grateful for.
Of course, but that's a lot, you know. I mean, even just somebody giving you, like my parents, I think they don't have they obviously don't have the kind of money that I can talk, but they gave me an education in spite of not being educated themselves. So I mean, that's a huge privilege to have for myself, you know. So I look at it like that. But more than that, it was a pleasure, and it was such a nice conversation that we had, and I wish you all the ecstasy in the world. I mean, pun unintended. So I wish you.
How much do I have to pay you for it?
You have to pay. And thank you.
I only do soft drugs now. Yeah.
Like cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no. So that is so it's a super conversation, and thank you so much for this time and for everything that we talked today.
Thank you, Atul, for letting me speak my mind and making me speak more than I have done in the last 6 months in a couple of hours. I will always remember this fondly, I hope.
I hope to. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I drop a new episode every Friday night at around 10 pm. I will also end this and every episode by recommending a film or a web series. But before that, here is a small message on how you can help to keep this podcast alive and growing. This episode is free, and we intend to keep it that way. But it does take a lot of time, money, and effort to produce the show. We research, write, record, and edit before we finally present it to you. So if you wish to support our effort, you can help us produce the show by contributing any amount you wish on our website, conversationswithatul.com. Please note that the word conversations is plural with an S. So do visit conversationswithatul.com. And here is my film reco. The film I recommend today is the Academy Award nominated The Motorcycle Diaries. Based on books by Che Guevara and Alberto Granado, screenplay by Jose Rivera and directed by Walter Salas. The Motorcycle Diaries is the true story of an 8,000-kilometer road trip undertaken by medical student Che Guevara. It is an intriguing film, as it is said that this is the trip where Guevara found his true calling. The Motorcycle Diaries rates a roaring 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb. Do watch if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter by following my Twitter handle Atul Taishete, spelled as ATULTAISHETE. Also, do visit my website Conversations, that is Conversations plural with an S. The complete website address is conversationswithatul.com. So see you next Friday at 10 pm with a different guest, a new episode and a fresh conversation right here on Conversations with Atul. Have a rocking fun week and stay safe. Thank you.